Good morning. Barney Kramer, President and founder of Strategic Management. Today we're going to be looking at how to get heard and how to get promoted. To succeed in achieving your dreams and goals, you have to be heard. In order to be heard, you must know the core skills of the business and leadership and to be able to talk about them. And to succeed, you must be able to competently apply your skills to any position you hold or the business you own or run. And for today's agenda, we'll look at the part of the problem in front of you now. We'll look at the reasons you are in the position you are, and we'll look at the solution, more particularly at the Better Way solution. But first, I want to share my own experience with you and why I can identify with the discussion today. As a young boy, I fell in love with the idea of having my own business. There was a neighborhood sporting goods store just a few blocks from my house, and that's where I got my first baseball glove and bat. And I immediately fell in love with the sports. And for a little boy who loved sports, a sporting goods store was like being in heaven. Where do I start? I thought that was the greatest place I'd ever been in. And when I look back, that's where I decided I wanted to own one just like it when I grew up. And although I never told anybody, the dream never went away as I grew up and began working a variety of jobs to keep me in the lifestyle I wanted. Over time, it eventually didn't matter whether it was a sporting goods store or not, just so long as I got to own a business of my own. And after a few jobs in my early years for the kinds of bosses I wouldn't wish on anyone, I decided it was better to give the orders than to carry them out. The only problem I had was that I didn't have any money to buy a business of any kind since I was spending it as fast as I made it. But fortune stepped in, and in my late 20s, a casual fishing friend that knew I was looking for something else asked if I was interested in taking over one of his businesses that was failing. And that was my shot at a dream, so I took it. Through lots of trial and error and hard work, we eventually turned the business into a profitable one that survived for many years after I had moved on, and that was the beginning of the entrepreneurial journey I'm still on today. Over a number of years, there were a couple more turnarounds, one on a national level, and some startups, all with varying degrees of success. And I was convinced that it was my business skills, intuition, and persistence that were the explanation for my success. What I didn't see until my early 40s was that the answer was about to come, the whole issue was about to come to a screeching halt. I hit what I call the brick wall, and I refer to that as a point when hard work, persistence, and good fortune isn't enough to carry you through. What I had missed was the fact that I was doing the work of two people and that I really didn't have a life. Well, that crash turned out to be the best thing that could have happened to me. I realized that no matter how hard I worked, I couldn't do it alone, and that I needed to know a lot more than what I did. And at that junction was when I began to acquire the skills I have today and that I'm going to share with you. And that was that seminal moment in my business career when I realized that just desire and ambition and hard work wasn't going to be enough and that I was going to have to learn how you built and sustained the business. And even more importantly, I took action to rectify my lack of skills. So here's the problem the majority of you have already experienced or will experience before long, even if you've been in business for a while. You've done what was required of you and you earned your degree. You worked hard. Maybe you've had 2 or 3 jobs over a few years and are very good at your technical expertise. The next step in the career you dreamed of is to step into a role where you begin to lead others and take a more responsible position with an organization, and your own accomplishments will begin to come less from your own work than from what your associates and others that you put together as a team can accomplish. But what you don't know is that you're just about ready to hit that brick wall I spoke of. And it won't be long before that wall knocks you flat. You see, more than 60% of the 2 million people promoted every year into various types of management and leadership positions, for them, failure is just around the corner. They haven't been trained in leading others and as a result won't be able to achieve the goals and initiatives set out for them. Imagine 1.2 million people on the road to failure, all because no one cared whether you knew and were ready for the next step in your career or not. But let's take a quick half step backwards and learn about what I call the 3P principle of business. Business success requires a product or a service that someone's willing to pay for, an efficient process of production and delivery, and the right people to execute the strategy and tactics developed as a part of the vision of the business. You get these three pieces right, and the part in the middle is yours. People are the essence of everything a business does or doesn't do, and make all of the decisions that determine the product and the process that will be used to deliver it to the intended market. If you get the people part of the equation right, success is a very real possibility. Get it wrong and you can forget it. The Better Way solution focuses on the three core business and people skills that are common denominators in successful people and businesses as far back as you want to go. And that's what we are going to work on. And the three C's are creating a vision and a strategy to execute that vision, communicating the vision and strategy, and creating a culture to support and sustain the vision. So let's get started. Creating a vision is the process of developing a picture in your mind of what you want for your life in the future, translating it into the written word, picturing it in your mind, and developing it even further into specific action steps. You can have visions for all aspects of your life: business, health, finances, relationship, career, and more. Visioning uses both mental and physical tools of your mind and body, such as the thoughts and actions, to create and realize your goals. It's been widely acknowledged by experts that there is power in defining, declaring, and then committing to what you want your life to look like. Your vision is the articulation of your desired future. A clear vision will help to set a desired course for you. Without this direction to guide us, we often fail to acquire the quality of life we want and expect. And here are a couple of strategic visions. IKEA, whose vision is to create a better everyday life for the many people. And they do that through the manufacturing and furnishing and providing of home settings, turning a home into or a house into a home, if you will. But I think probably the most powerful I can think of in my lifetime is John F. Kennedy's decision to put a man on the moon by the end of the decade of the 60s. And that was such a powerful vision because at that time the Russian nation and the United States were in a technology race, and that race was being defined in part by who would be the first nation rather, to put a man on the moon. And that was very important because the stated goals of the Russian nation were to actually have the entire world adopt communism, and we didn't feel that was our way of life then or now. But one, just to give you an idea of today's, Google's latest iteration is to give anyone, anywhere, access to information. And frankly, they're doing a pretty phenomenal job of that. I love the ability to jump on and find out information about anything, just about anywhere, and that's kind of worldwide. So I have to say they're doing a pretty fine job of accomplishing that vision. And of course, you see the image of Sears up there, who actually started their vision clear back in the late 1800s. I forget the specific date on it. That vision was to help improve the lives of people by providing quality products and services. And while they're struggling in the marketplace for different reasons today, certainly they've survived for somewhere around 140 or 150 years. So let's shift to how to create a vision. Write down what you really want your business and life to look like. Think about the best vision you can imagine. Don't worry about how you're going to make it happen. Instead, focus on what you really desire, not what somebody else tells you desire, but what you really desire, because this is your vision and it's nobody else's. And be as specific as possible. Here are some questions to answer when you do that, when you start creating your vision. And of course, you can fill that out with your other ideas and other questions. But just as a place to start, What's the product or service that you have that you think is worthy of putting into the marketplace? Who is it going to be helping? What are the benefits of the product? How many people do you want to serve? Who are you working with? What's your area of specialty? Are you traveling and speaking to audiences? Do you want to? Are you meeting with clients in person or remotely? What does your daily and weekly schedule look like? You're going to want to take vacations, or you're going to work 6 days a week or 7 days a week. How much money you're making? How much do you want to make? How vividly can you create your vision of the ideal business? This is your business, your idea, your dream, and you get to design it at least from this point moving forward. So how clear can you get on that vision? And the more clarity in that vision that you have, the greater the benefits to the intended uh, beneficiaries of this, whether it's product or services, the more likely this is to be able to serve you and your business in such a powerful way that it helps you attract others that will share in that vision and share in your dream. And that you can imagine what that space shot did. We've got all kinds of technology, things we use today, and Tyvek and plastics and computers, and the list goes on and on and on. And either directly the result of that or the indirect result of that. And we had a whole nation pulling together to make that dream come true, and did it. So once you have that vision firmly in place, you have to have a strategy. And a strategy is the plan you have to put your product or services in your intended target's hands. And I'll give you what I think is a great example because it's been around for centuries. Michelangelo's David story. Well, the true story about that is he was commissioned to carve as a sculptor, to carve 4 or 5 different examples of the great Bible figures. And instead of doing what he was asked to do, what he decided to do was he fell in love with this huge piece of granite and decided what he was going to do was to sculpt the David and to carve that out of a piece of marble with a hammer and chisel. And when it was completed, it's considered to be one of the most magnificent piece of art ever. And he was asked the question, which is the same that we get asked today occasionally. How did you do that? He says it was simple. He says what I did is I carved away or chipped away with that hammer and chisel all the pieces of that huge block of marble that didn't look like the David. Well, the answer to that sounds simple, but it can pose bigger problems than are needed for many. But it doesn't have to be when you keep your eye on the vision and you understand how it differs for the mission. Asking the right question in each step is step one in the process. And although the definition is clear, it helps to expand it a bit. A business strategy is a set of guiding principles that, when communicated and adopted in an organization, generates a desired pattern of decision making. The strategy is about how people throughout the organization should make decisions and allocate resources in order to accomplish that vision. A good strategy provides a clear roadmap consisting of a set of guiding principles or rules and define those actions. But it's just one element of the overall strategic direction that leaders must define for their organization. Strategy is not a mission. A mission is what the organization's leaders want it to accomplish. Missions get elaborated into specific goals and performance metrics. A strategy is also not the value network. It's not about the web of relationships with suppliers, etc. Finally, a strategy is not a vision. A vision is a vision. This is the end result of what I want to do. I want to eradicate polio. I want to help improve the uh, care of animals through the SPCA, and it goes on and on and on. In a nutshell, a mission is about what will be achieved. This is what will be achieved as a result. Animals will be they won't have to suffer the abuse. We'll be able to uh, carve out the kind of a future that we want for ourselves. So let me repeat and simplify what I've just shared with you. Kennedy's vision was to put a man on the moon by the end of the 60s. His strategy was to do that with the use of a powerful rocket carrying what's now known as a lunar module. That would be the life support system for a human being on the journey, and then support him when he exited the vehicle and stepped on the moon. And so the ultimate question that should drive the search for the right strategy is, will this help me achieve my vision or not? So every decision you make has to be guided by that. Is it going to help me get closer to it or not? Picking the colors for the celebration of the balloons and food had nothing to do with getting a man on the moon. An outrageous example for sure, but it drives the point home about what a strategy is and how we develop it. And like much of what we learn in the skills we need to excel in business, clarity comes with the actual application of the material and not until then. You can literally read books from now till the cows come home and learn just volumes of knowledge and information which will mean nothing to you until you actually learn how to apply it in the real life. So the second of our C's is to be able to communicate the vision and the strategy. The definition I like for communications is making a connection with another or with others to exchange ideas, information, and knowledge that are important to both parties. But a famous playwright of times past put it succinctly when he said that the greatest single problem with communications is that it has actually occurred. How frequently, how costly it is when we think we heard one thing and we do something else. And we'll look at some examples. In fact, I'll give you a recent example of my own. I called one of my vendors to find out if I could use a fourth user, and he confirmed that yes, I had 4 users and I could do that. Well, I already had 3 and couldn't get the fourth one in. And so after 45 minutes of this chat box discussion, the conclusion came near the end of it when he said, "Oops, I've made a mistake. You only have 3 users." You know, his apologies with 45 minutes of wasted time on a Sunday afternoon with a football game on television could have fallen on deaf ears, and it wasn't the first one I've had with them. It's about the third time that's happened. Uh, Probably a perfect example of the time and the waste and frustration it caused because he wasn't paying attention. He made an assumption without knowing the facts on it. So your ability to convey that vision or to have that great vision isn't going to mean a thing unless you learn how to communicate it to all those people around you. And you have to communicate it clearly. So in order to be effective at communications, or what I call good communications, it starts with thinking through what you want to say, deciding who it is that's going to be communicated to, what their level of knowledge is, and what's the best way to present it in this particular instance, whether it's orally or written or visually or a combination of these things. Anytime you can combine a couple things, the oral with the spoken along with the visual, you've got 2 of the best ways to communicate, and you enhance your chances of succeeding. And then we need to get the attention of the recipients we've chosen for the information we have. Since much of our communications is in the ordinary course of work life is verbal, that means the intended audience has to be listening. When the communications are more than just casual, the listener might confirm the question before responding. And lastly, both parties have the responsibility. It doesn't fall on one or the other, although it does begin with the communicator. If you can't say what you're going to say and say it clearly, you're in trouble. Okay. And Frank, 2 of the biggest problems with communications today is, as the playwright said about it, was the fact that what happens with a listener, assuming the message is clear, is most people aren't listening. They're doing one of 2 things. They're deciding what their answer is going to be and how they're going to respond to it, which is almost universal. And compounding that problem is the concept of multitasking, which simply is, frankly, it's a bucket of baloney. We don't multitask. What we do is shift from one thing to another. So I'm not quite sure how you work a computer or an iPhone, some of the tools that we have while you're trying to listen to something that's being said. And if you don't think it's important, Companies with good communications, which are in the minority, tend to have financial performance figures that can be as much as 40% or more higher than those with poor communications. Doesn't take much thought to understand why. If we need to go right and I just told you to go left, we're in trouble. So let me give you an example of one of the best communicators I believe around. It happens to be in the business world, Peter Drucker. Peter Drucker is one of the best of all times in our world, and he was able to reduce his explanations to the simplest of terms, understandable by all. He said that a business is defined by what its objectives are, what's the vision, how it defines its results, how do I know when I've accomplished it, who its customers are, who are my target audience, and what they value and are willing to pay for. And it doesn't get much simpler than that. If you can answer those four questions. Has anybody ever read a business book by one of the gurus of their time, so full of complex run-on sentences that are constructed of multiple syllable words or look like an English teacher's dream sentence for a diagramming test, and then found out that it was almost impossible to understand it and more important to apply it to the world we live in? It is a communicator's responsibility to deliver a communication in such a way that the intended audience can understand it, not the recipient's job to interpret the message. And we've got some people out there in this world today that are absolutely phenomenal. For sort of a different reason, Zuckerberg is one of them. He's given people the opportunity to communicate with anybody, anywhere, anytime, and there's some pluses and minuses to that. You can take somebody like Oprah, who opened up that whole, what would I call it, that sort of a heart-centered form of communications that creates some transparency and some authenticity and helps people and challenges. She's built an empire out of that. And the third C is creating a changed culture and why it's essential. A changed culture is one that is able to adapt to the world as it changes and to be in the forefront of that changes. Why is it important? It's important because change is inevitable whether we like it or not. And the continued success of your career or business depends upon your recognition of the change, your willingness to embrace it, and your ability to make the right changes. People who have the ability to do this and companies that are organizations willing to develop a change culture will usually find themselves at the top of their career possibilities and at the top of their industry niches. Those that fight the need to change when needed will end up in the business dumpster wondering what happened. You can usually spot them by the words, things like, "Our way has always worked. We aren't going to change no matter what. I can never get my people to do that. I know what I'm talking about. Don't tell me what to do. I'm going to do it my way." I've been around people like that, and at a different time, in a different place in my own world, as a really young man, that kind of stupidity came out of my mouth more often than I'd like to admit. And let's look at a fairly recent example, a company like Yahoo, who refused to recognize that they were an advertising company, using a search engine as a platform for advertising sales, which is what Google ultimately figured out, or the farmers that wouldn't adapt to mechanization, or the automakers who couldn't sell their cars but kept grinding them out anyway. This was during what I call the lead sled area, where the Japanese cars, the smaller cars, were beginning to catch on as a result of our oil energy crisis at that time. And yet they said, "Don't worry about it. They'll never buy those little cars," and it just about destroyed them. And more importantly is to remember just a couple of axioms, I guess, if you will. All improvement is the result of change, but all change does not result in improvement. Understanding what and when to change is often the result of hard-won experience and an intuition developed as a result of this. It requires people to step back from the swamp and the alligator fight and remember what the mission was. And obstacles are inevitable when you begin to embrace change. And once you've accepted the need for change, you must understand that and be able to challenge and change the perspective of those who will be affected the most from that change. And the simplest piece of that is understanding that you probably aren't going to be able to do it by yourself. But when you put a team together that buys into your concept, and you've got a sale on your hands, and that's exactly what you're doing. In order to be able to convince people that your idea is something that's worth doing, something worth putting some energy and effort into, because we all know that change isn't always, as we say, easy, then get the people involved. Explain to them why. Explain to them what the benefits are. Help them to understand how it's going to benefit them. And you're going to find out that, and then more importantly, probably the last one, if nothing changes, then nothing changes, which simply means that in a world that has technology and change moving as fast as we have today, uh, you stand in the same position, you're doing the same exact things you did a year ago. You can just bet that that you're losing your position in the marketplace. And just to validate that, I think one of the simplest examples I ever heard of was somebody said that if you're going to ask the janitor to use a new broom, give him a voice in picking out what broom works best for him. And that's too often we sit at the top of this mountain thinking that we've got all the answers and we know better. In fact, we have more often than not we don't have a clue. And if my words didn't get it, then take a look at this little guy. He's been chasing that carrot for a long time, and the only reason he continues to do it is he says, "There's a reason for me to do this. I know I'm going to catch that carrot one of these days." And so, if you've got an organization that you're trying to facilitate change and you aren't willing to really dig in and understand the process and get the buy-in that you need, you're going to be in a lot of trouble. So, wouldn't it be cool if we had a genie that we could get career wishes granted for us from? Well, the good news is that you don't need a genie to accomplish what you need to do or what you want to do in your career. What you need is the courage to accept your own reality, to embrace what's working and change what isn't. Get the skills you don't have and learn to be a part of the conversation and solution instead of a silent dissenter or the king of hindsight like so many others. And if you make that choice, wave goodbye to any real chances for career growth in the life that you work for. You have to be willing to say, there's a reason that I'm not being heard. The reason I'm not getting promoted, and that reason is that nobody's listening to what I know, what I have to say. And that may be because you don't have anything to say and you don't know a whole lot beyond your own technical expertise. Um, So I hope that something that I've said to you today has sparked an interest in taking a deeper dive into your own skills and accomplishment and finding out how you can move your career. And more importantly, maybe, is the fact that you want to be ready when that day comes, because there are occasions, and I've seen them happen, when somebody gets thrown into a position whether they want it or not. And I actually know of one of those situations where the answer from their boss when they said, I don't want to be a manager, I don't want to be a leader, is basically it was tough noogie. We picked you. And then the response was, well, I don't know anything about it. Well, that's a tough one too, because if you don't know anything about it, you won't be around long. And I don't have time to help you learn. So you need to do this on your own. Companies don't want to spend money on people that have announced, on a generation, frankly, that's announced that, hey, we know that our career path is all about a couple years here and a couple years there. They're not going to spend money on you. So what you need to do is to accept reality and say, I'm willing to invest my time and energy in this so that when my turn in the barrel comes, that I'm ready for it. So it's my belief that the three skills in the better way are essential to the success of your professional career and in business. When you learn them and adopt them as a pathway to your success with people, you enter the small minority that are more likely than not to have the kind of career you contemplated and dreamed about. But in the same way, the lack of skills that I referred to earlier as the brick wall are an impenetrable barrier to your career. There is another barrier. The good news is that just as you have the power to overcome the brick wall, you also have the power to overcome this one. And that power comes from within you. And that power is your desire and willingness to act on what I've just shared with you. 75% of people in positions of management in roles of any kind today are not qualified or prepared to be in those roles. And of course, failure is imminent to them, and those aren't my statistics that think tanks will verify. You could truthfully say that they are a little more than a placeholder for someone taking the steps to learn what they are doing. And when that person comes along, they're gone. But for most, if not all, when they entered the real world and began applying their education, they were exposed to issues, challenges, and solutions, just like today, that were about their leaders, their teams, their work environment, and a whole host of relationships inside and outside of the business where they worked. Many took very little interest in examining the problem and the solutions, and instead thought they had it going on and that their talent would take care of them, a little like me back in my younger days. And that was one of their biggest missteps on the path to a rewarding and purposeful career. Unless your work allows you to be locked up in a cave to come out only when you're done, your success will, and I repeat, will depend upon how well you work with other people. People who know what you don't know and don't have the time and maybe the ability to learn. And this putting your head in the sand is where it became their issue and where they failed and the problem became one of their own. It isn't what you don't know, it's your unwillingness to learn something new that'll be the deal killers for you. And what they did is they chose to ignore the facts that those who succeeded in their careers in business were those people with skills that allowed them to work with others and to accomplish goals and objectives with others as part of a team. And for some to become leaders when the time was right, and to work with them and help them become the best they can be at what they do. And they did this by example. They modeled the best and became an example of how to succeed and what you had to know to achieve that success. The rest passed. Too much work. It's not my job. Who cares? I'm not going to be here much longer anyway. I'll grow my career by changing jobs every couple of years and taking a step up each time. And a whole book full of excuses not to do what it takes to grow and build a career. And even the odd exception that seems to get through without their lack of skills being discovered, what I call the Peter Principle, eventually gets nearly every one of them. Recently, one of the great leaders of her age was found to be lacking in many areas of the skills he needed and was fired. Humpty Dumpty had another great big fall. And for most, when this happens, they're done. In today's world, ignorance is not bliss, especially when it is willful. Try to explain to a prospective employer why you failed because you weren't willing to put the effort into developing the skills you needed. It's a reflection of character, and poor character is a path to permanent failure. But for those of you who are still with me, I believe you still have the desire to achieve your dreams and goals and are ready to make the right choice today. So here's my offer to you. The 3 modules we discussed today usually sell for $1,047, but for today's webinar attendees, your price is just $397. Each module is an audio PowerPoint delivered online to 4 separate lessons, recorded parts that you listen to them at your convenience when it suits you. They are yours to keep. Included is an expanded version, written version of each lesson for you to keep as a reference for future use. And along with that audio PowerPoint, there's a audio only version that you can take with you wherever you go, in the car or on a trip. In addition, you get a fully enhanced transcription of the presentation itself to study along with it and to keep as a reference. And also you get some application exercises and templates so that you don't just listen to this information, you learn how to apply it if you're willing to take the time to do that. Course is spread out over 6 weeks in 3 parts to allow you to cover the material itself in about a half hour per week, 2 lessons per week. And the amount of time you put into it after that is your decision. Obviously, the more you practice something, the better you get at it. So your investment in the program is just $397. But as an incentive for this for this particular webinar session, every 2 weeks you're invited and encouraged to join a live Q&A coaching session with me to clarify and expand on the module you just studied. And of course, the support we give you is designed to assure you that you are learning to apply these skills to real-life challenges that you may be facing. And that's not the end of it. I've decided to build a community of like-minded people around the recognition that continued learning is important. And in that group, there's a monthly fee of $49. But but for those of you that are joining me today and are making that decision within the next week, that fee is waived for you for the first year. In addition, every month you will receive a newsletter with business articles that support your career growth and development. And so just in summary, for $397, you get the regular course valued at $1,097. Membership in the Coaches Corner group for a full year valued at $588. You get the 3 live 1-hour coaching sessions that are tied directly to this course. Typically, I charge my time out in a group at $150 an hour, $450. So for a grand total of value that you're receiving for $2,135 is yours for just $397. I'm so confident that you'll immediately begin to see and benefit from this package of skills that after finishing the first module, if you don't believe you've received value from it, then I will refund you your entire purchase price. And you can keep that module and the course content. I'm not sure how it gets any better than that, but what I know that I'm talking to certainly some of you on this program that recognize that, hey, I've got work to do. And that's, my real growth and the fact that I've continued to have a successful career over many years has to do more with the fact that I became willing to listen and to learn from others. It wasn't the magnificent mind that I was giving and so proud of my own hard work and yada, yada, yada. So I look forward to hearing from a few of you. And so I made 3 promises to you before we started. And when you decided to at least look at. So I made 3 promises to you if you signed up for this webinar. And here's the rest of the reasons why you made a great decision to join me. First was to show you how to create a vision so powerful that you'd be able to develop a high performance team and to accomplish the goals and the objectives that you want in your career. And the second was to be able to help you communicate that vision and strategy to the people that you're working with. Your vision doesn't do you much of anything if you can't communicate it. And the third part of it was to create a culture that few people are able to achieve. And frankly, it may be the toughest part of any businesses, and that's actually be able to be fluid and in front of everything. But what you get out of the ability to do that is so powerful that those handful of companies that can do that, they are always going to be the leaders in the organization. And I'll give you one that the jury is still out on an awful lot of things, but it personifies to me what that means, and that's Tesla. He took a battery that he had and began to realize that it could solve a problem. And while there's lots of arguments pro and con about it, certainly he's doing some very innovative things. He's working on a shot to the moon. And one of those kind of people that sees the future and says that, hey, the way we're doing it now doesn't always have to be that way. Will there be failures? Absolutely. Well, the successes, in my view, have a long-term effect that far outweigh those times when we go down a path that doesn't work. Okay. So what we've done here is we've just taken a 10,000-foot view of 3 of the 6 basic skills that are required for you to really have a successful business career, whether it's working in a position for an organization or whether it's leading people or running your own business. And until you can do that, your voice won't matter to anybody. Your career won't go much further than it is today. When you get as good as you're going to get at the position you're in, if it's a CPA, you're counting all those things and you never get it wrong. That's fine and dandy, but you don't ever get to step beyond that until you learn other skills. So as good as this is, there's a secret sauce that completes the recipe for success. And we haven't talked a lot about that. But that is the attitudinal competency of self-mastery that is sprinkled throughout the concepts that I'm sharing with you and with the actual application of those and learning of those 3 concepts. And a good general definition of self-mastery is the ability to make the most out of your physical, mental, and spiritual health. In other words, to be the best you can be. Being the best you can be brings out the best in those around you and those you may lead someday. As you set an example that personifies the best of what you can be, You make it easy and desirable for others to follow that suit. The best possible potential out there, the kind of talent that will help you accomplish that dream and that vision that you had and you set forth. And as a result of your efforts, you'll be able to help everyone around you. In order for you to change the world around you or change the business or the industry around you for the better, you have to change yourself for the better to begin with. You can't sit on a mountaintop waiting for perfection before you help your fellow man. The time to help is now, and we must look at ourselves as works in progress. Appreciate yourself for who you are, and what you've accomplished so far. Appreciate your friends, family, and associates for who they are. Accept them as they are without expecting perfection. Where do we start learning the secrets of self mastery? If you accept things around you without demand, you already have taken the first step. There are two important factors here. Once you accept people and situations for what they are, you won't waste time and energy with frustration. This causes inner frustration, emotional turmoil, worries, and depression. Once you change yourself through positive self mastery, the world around you will change for the better without much effort on your part. You'll not be able to make all the changes to mind, body, and spirit at once, but they are connected. What a journey. So, just a quick review of what we learned today. We've learned that the quality of leadership today is very poor. We've learned about the brick wall and the path to success. We've learned that roughly 2 million people a year are promoted each year to supervisory or higher positions, and that roughly 60% of them will fail or be on the path to failure within their first year because they lacked the skills they needed. We've learned that you must be heard to get promoted. We learned that you have to be able to make a contribution to the conversation to be heard. And we've learned how to do that by learning how to create a vision and a strategy, how to communicate effectively, and how to create a changed culture. And I assure you that we've skimmed three deep, complex subjects, but I've given you some of the core principles as to why they're important and some general principles about how that has to happen and how to go about creating those three pieces of the puzzle. And lastly, as you learn more about the skills you require for business or career success, you begin to distinguish yourself from the crowd, and your voice will be one to be heard. And when it's your time to step up to your career, you'll be ready. And it's that simple. So I'm thrilled that you joined me today and allowed me to share some of what I've learned that has been life-changing for me and many others, and who are willing to invest in themselves for a better life. My best to all of you, and I look forward to those of you who are ready and willing to get started on your journey of success by making the decision to join me in a better way. We'll be talking soon. Best wishes to all of you, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to share my knowledge and experience with you.